Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. What I would also say is whether Kentucky wins or if Kentucky loses, it does not change the fact that they are probably the best story in college football right now. I mean, there are other good ones. I don't think that there is a better story than the University of Kentucky right now where Mark Stoops is doing something, and I've tweeted this out the last few weekends. I think it is one of the great stories and rebuilds that I have ever seen in my time watching college sports. Kentucky, in my lifetime, before Mark Stoops got there, essentially had no football history to speak of. You make a bowl game every couple years. Sometimes you go 7-5. Sometimes you go 5-7. But you are in the pecking order in the SEC way down the list. Mark Stoops gets there. It admittedly takes a while. It was not in good shape when he got there. But now he has this thing rolling. And I think Kentucky is one of the most stable programs in the SEC right now. On top of that, doing things that have very rarely, if ever, been done there. 3 years ago, 2018, they win 10 games. This year, it feels as though they are trending towards, at the very least, another 10-win season. And when you start to look at the schedule, Florida's behind them, LSU's behind them, a tough road game at South Carolina is behind them. I don't think 11 wins is out of the question and potentially a New Year's Six bowl game, which could be the Sugar Bowl, could be the Fiesta Bowl, whatever. And so I bring all this up because Mark Stoops is doing something incredible heading into the Georgia game. And before we get to the preview, I want to hit on something that a lot of you guys have asked me. Everyone knows we have a lot of Kentucky fans that listen to this show, and a ton of you have asked me point blank, straight up, in the last probably 2-3 weeks. You've slid into my mentions, you've slid into my DMs, and you've asked me one simple question. Torres, do you ever think Mark Stoops would leave Kentucky? And if so, where would he leave for? Because this is the price of success anywhere in college football. When you have success, your coach is going to be in demand. And essentially, if they're not coaching at Alabama, Ohio State, wherever, there's always a chance that somebody could jump in and grab them. And by the way, even when you're at Alabama, Ohio State, Oklahoma, there's a chance the NFL could come swoop your coach. So a lot of you have asked me about Mark Stoops, and I want to hit on it, and I want to say this. I think if you're a Kentucky fan, I really don't think there's much to worry about. And what I would also say is I really only think, despite his success, there's a couple jobs that really make sense for Mark Stoops. First of all, I think if I was a betting man, which I am, by the way, thanks to our partners at DraftKings, if I was a betting man, what I would say is pretty simple. If I had to wager on where Mark Stoops ends his career, I would actually bet it's going to be Kentucky. So if you're a Kentucky fan that is worried that all this success is going to ultimately end with Mark Stoops leaving, I would say I still think at the end of the day, he probably retires at Kentucky. And the reason he retires at Kentucky is because something that I think any Kentucky fan, or really, I think really any college football fan at this point kind of knows. Kentucky's kind of a great job in the pantheon of college football. Now, there are certainly schools, and we talk about them all the time, LSU, Texas, Ohio State, Penn State, that probably have a higher ceiling in the big picture. But many argue, I've heard Andy Staples, great college football writer for The Athletic, argue that Kentucky is actually the best job in college football. Now, some of you Bama fans, Florida fans, Tennessee, whoever, you're probably sitting there saying that's the most preposterous thing that I've ever heard. But the argument that Kentucky is the best job in college football is pretty simple. You get paid like an SEC coach. Mark Stoops makes over $5 million a year. You are at a school where you get all of the financial support of an SEC school. There is no thing that if Mark Stoops keeps winning that he wants that he won't get. I just saw some tweets, as a matter of fact, on Thursday about facility upgrades, all that kind of stuff. And on top of that, you do not have the crazy expectations of most SEC schools. That is not a criticism. That is what makes the SEC great. But there's a lot of schools where if you go 9-3, you go 8-4, you might lose your job. I mean, Coach O could go 8-4 this year. I think he's probably going to lose his job. Dan Mullen's going 9-3, and some Florida fans are mad with him every single year. Kentucky is not one of those places, and so that is the argument that it is one of the best jobs in college football. You get a couple 9-win seasons, a 10-win season, maybe an 11-win season, they're going to build you a freaking statue. It's not, you're not on a 1-year clock like Coach O. You win a national championship and 18 months later they're trying to get rid of you. You have time at Kentucky. You can have a down year. And if you win 8, 9, 10 games every so often, they're going to build a freaking statue for you. As a matter of fact, I would argue that right now in the SEC, Mark Stoops probably has more job security than anyone other than Nick Saban. And so if I was betting on if he ever leaves, I actually think that he'll stay. But what I would also say is that even with all of his success, I don't believe that he would be a great fit at a lot of places, which also helps Kentucky. First of all, there are the ones that just make no sense. USC is currently opened up. Really cool gig. Maybe I'm completely wrong on this. I live in L.A. Mark Stoops doesn't feel L.A. to me. Pete Carroll felt L.A. Even Lane Kiffin, for all we criticize, he felt USC. Sark felt USC. James Franklin feels USC. Mark Stoops does not feel USC. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's their first call. I don't see that one, though. On top of that, I think because of his blueprint for building Kentucky, I don't think he makes sense for a lot of other jobs either. For people who are not familiar with kind of what he's done at Kentucky and how he's gotten him to this level, he is obviously, one of the Stoops brothers, obviously really well connected in Ohio. And essentially what he did was early in his time there and really throughout his time, even now, he's gone up to Ohio and said a couple things. One, if you're not going to Ohio State, whether you're coming to Ohio State or not, leave that boring, slow, 3 yards in a cloud of dust Big Ten. Come play with us in the SEC. And so he has had a ton of success recruiting the Midwest. They're now making inroads in Michigan. Highest rated recruit in the history of the program came from Michigan. And so he is having a ton of success recruiting in the Midwest and saying, hey, come on south, come play in the SEC. Oh, by the way, Kentucky is not a very far drive for you. Your family can come, all that good stuff. And you can play the best football in college football. And so while that blueprint has been insanely successful at Kentucky, I would add, too, the transfer portal helps. You plug holes, Wandale Robinson, Will Levis, the Jones kid from Ole Miss, the linebacker. That is the blueprint. I don't know if that blueprint works at a lot of other places outside of Kentucky. And so, even like a job like LSU that's open right now, right? Mark Stoops just punked LSU a few days ago. And, I think maybe an LSU fan 30,000 feet says, hey, maybe he's not our first choice, but look at what he's done at Kentucky. But does that blueprint work? And if he goes to a school like LSU, is he going to have to completely revamp the blueprint that has led him to have success at Kentucky? And that's why I think it doesn't make sense for him for a lot of other jobs, not only that could be open this year, but could be open going forward. If Georgia ever opens up, I don't think Mark Stoops really makes sense. If Texas opened up again, which it probably will because it's Texas, if Oklahoma opened up, even if you're winning 10 games at Kentucky, I don't know if that blueprint makes sense for a lot of schools outside of kind of Kentucky and in that footprint. So with that said, I really don't see the number of schools where he makes a ton of sense for. So let's get into where I think he could actually legitimately leave Kentucky for, because I think that list is really, really, really small, and I think most Kentucky fans kind of know where it is. One, I do think the right job in the Midwest, in the Big Ten, would appeal to him. Because I do think Kentucky, this is not a criticism, it's just a reality. There is kind of a glass ceiling at Kentucky, right? You might beat Florida in 1 year, but now we got Georgia coming up. You might beat Georgia in 1 year, but now you got Alabama in the SEC championship game. And so to me, I believe that he would only leave Kentucky for probably a Midwest job. I don't think he's going anywhere else in the SEC. A Midwest job where he could truly compete for national championships. I'm not talking about Purdue. I'm not talking about Illinois. I'm not talking about Iowa. I'm not talking about Wisconsin. But I do think, like, if Michigan opened up, like I could see him being a player at Michigan. As I just said, he recruits Michigan really well. Vince Marrow, obviously his lead recruiter, is from Ohio. They recruit Ohio very well. And so I could see the scenario where those two, where he decides that Michigan is the right job for him. But how many of those other jobs would be available? I don't think he'd be the first choice at Ohio State. Ohio State fancies themselves as we can get any coach on the planet. I think they would want to go after an NFL coach or, kind of a national championship caliber coach, maybe back to Luke Fickell. I don't know. But outside of Ohio State, maybe Michigan. I don't even know if Penn State makes sense. Nebraska, Nebraska has history, but in 2021, can you really win a national championship there? If that job opens up, I don't know. And so you start to whittle down the list. Again, he ain't leaving for Rutgers. He ain't leaving for, Purdue or Iowa or Wisconsin or Illinois. So maybe Michigan, maybe Nebraska, a school like that. The only other ones I could see potentially, the two Florida schools, Miami or Florida State. For people who don't know, he obviously spent time at Florida State prior to coming to Kentucky. He has seen it at its best. They won big there. He worked under Jimbo Fisher. He worked under Bobby Bowden, I believe, there for a little while. And so, if Florida State opens up, I mean, that is one that, I could see that scenario because he's familiar there. He's had success there. And, oh, by the way, on top of that, let's also not forget that the ACC, that is a clear path to a national championship in the ACC. Not a clear path because Clemson's there, but you get the point, is that it's a much easier path than the SEC. You get Florida State rolling, you can compete for national championships. Obviously, he's familiar with Florida. He's recruited Florida, Kentucky, all that kind of stuff. The other one is Miami, and Miami's another one he's worked at. I've actually interviewed him about his time at Miami. This was many years ago when I was at FoxSports.com, and he really loved his time at Miami. Kind of got there in that end of the Larry Coker era, or the beginning of the Larry Coker era, where Ed Reed was there for a year when he was there. Philip Buchanan, who's a buddy of mine, was there. Sean Taylor, the late Sean Taylor, who we found out the Redskins or the Washington football team is going to honor him this weekend. Very bizarre decision by Washington football. But, Miami's another one that I think is in play. But even Miami, I don't even know if they have the money to outbid Kentucky. I mean, Miami, for people who don't know, is actually a small private school in a major city. Now, they run Miami when they're good, but they're not the typical school that has $9 million to spend on a head coach. And, I don't know if Mark Stoops is a $9 million coach, but I do think to get him to leave Kentucky, he's making $5 and change, you're going to have to do a lot better. So, in the end, my synopsis on this topic is pretty simple. I do believe if I had to bet, I would guess that Mark Stoops ultimately ends his career at Kentucky. But if he does not, I really think Kentucky fans, I don't want to say you don't have to worry because I don't want to put that out there and then I get yelled at if something happens. But the list of schools that genuinely make sense for him, I actually think are really, really, really small.